Thank you for joining us today for session 3 of Radio's digital transformation series, The Importance of Workflow and Processes. My name is Christine Petcher, Director of Marketing at Marketron. I'd like to walk you through a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please note that all participants are muted. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants afterwards. We ask that you submit any questions you'd like to ask our presenters via the chat box. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session for you. Any unanswered questions will be followed through by a team member, so please don't worry if we do not get to your question today. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our presenters today. JB Ozuna, Senior Director of Digital Strategy here at Marketron, and Angie May Russo, Senior Vice President, MS Digital and Marketing Partnerships at MS Communications. JB and Angie, thank you so much for being with us today. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to you now to get started.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Angie, for joining us.
Absolutely, happy to be here.
Great. It's a longtime friend of the company, and sorry we're all virtual, but looking forward to talking with you today. So, as you're attending this webinar, you're either at some point in a digital transformation of your radio business, and you've already evaluated either the need to improve your digital revenue or the need to begin generating new digital revenue. And as you're transforming your revenue operations and sales expectations, we feel you will need to evaluate or reevaluate some internal systems and consider changes specifically for digital revenue. We feel the items listed here can help you build a successful operation and should be considered as you map your plans for your revenue and operations team. There's a number of bullet points here, and we'll talk through them over the next 30, 45 minutes or so. Of importance to you is to understand where you are as an organization and how you can incorporate some of these or all of these to help you build out your digital operation. So let's talk about developing an account strategy. And Angie, would you please walk us through your experience here?
Yeah, absolutely. Like JB said, I think as you're evolving into digital, making the assumption that your current processes and workflows of how you operate a radio broadcast organization will not easily translate into what happens with digital. And I think that's what we'll start going over with some of these different pieces. So the first step of this is really figuring out an account strategy. I'm sure many of you have account strategies for your radio business and understanding what your key accounts or best accounts are and where your growth may happen within the audio industry. And really taking the time to do this for your digital business is a really important piece to start with. And it really starts with 3 simple things. The first is your current customer target list. So which customers that you currently are doing business with have the opportunity to grow if you are offering them digital opportunities, and really making and documenting who those people are and how you're going to approach those. Then the next step is really figuring out what is the new customers target list that you're going to go after. So what advertisers in your market are spending in digital may not be spending in broadcast. They may be spending in television and print historically, and you're going to go after them as a digital prospect. And then setting up the sales expectations for your sales teams of what does that look like? How do you approach these new customers? And you have AEs that are likely have relationships with customers for a really long time. And how do you make a plan to really approach these people and not just say, hey, we're going to take a digital offering and see if they say yes or no. So that's really those 3 pieces in an account strategy are kind of the starting point. The next big piece here is figuring out your average digital order size. And I think a mistake that I see made here a lot is people say, oh, I'm just going to add a couple $100 to my radio proposal to add digital into this place. And very much like a radio schedule, you really need to set some minimums and averages for your customers to have success in the digital space. And so that may take a little bit longer to close the deal because it's higher value than you may think, but it's certainly worth it on the back end of this. And I think the really key things that you're going to get from doing this is that your salespeople will be able to see what the revenue growth opportunity is. So if they see that adding $400 or $500 to their orders and their investments from their advertisers, it's not a lot of money and it doesn't make them a lot of money. But when you start to put average order size together with the number of account opportunities that they could have, it's significant growth for your salespeople and they'll get excited about it. Your managers can also really measure activity and see who's talking to who, and you can start to make sure that you're crossing off all of the action steps to really develop digital revenue. And then advertisers can start to see results quickly if you do this as well.
Those are great points, Angie. And, you know, as we call out on this slide here, you know, I think right now in particular, we're reevaluating where all of our revenue is coming from and looking at those advertisers that have remained active through a tumultuous, let's call it 2020, but also looking at, you know, what products were they active with. And, you know, if you were new to digital, it's obviously, you know, you were looking to maintain them with radio, your NTR probably took a hit. But if you saw them or prospected them from a competitor, you could see that they were on digital. And so, you know, we call out these average digital order sizes as a guideline. You know, there's some research behind them certainly, but you know, from within our walls or within Marketron or within our customers or just in talking to peers. But Angie makes a great point there that, you know, we need to understand that you know, the order values will be different. They will range by a type of market, size of market, or type of advertiser, and then there needs to be, you know, some expectation internally to make it worthwhile, because the work that goes into the digital orders is the same regardless of account size in many ways. Angie, the next thing we wanted to talk about was kind of mapping out the campaign execution. So, you know, you've developed a strategy, you know who you're calling upon. You know what type of order size you want to generate. Now, you know, what happens post-sale, what's pre-sale and post-sale, but, you know, what does this life cycle look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will tell you that this is something that I spent a significant amount of time in every single phase of digital evolution at Emmis. And it's a really important piece. And I think I'm going to start with the reasons why, and then I'll walk you guys through this, because I think it's important as you look through this, it can be overwhelming, especially for all of the other moving pieces in a broadcast radio's business. But the benefits for really mapping out how a campaign gets executed and how your customer experiences you is just that. You want to create a positive customer experience for your advertisers so that when they come in and purchase a digital product from them, and normally you're going to be selling them a digital plus a radio plus maybe an event or a content sponsorship all together, your advertiser will buy again if they have a great customer experience. And you see this in every other e-commerce product in today's world. So there's no reason for you not to do that. The other piece of this is it builds the confidence in your sales teams to continue to sell digital. And I'm sure all of you have had experience where you've rolled out a new product and there may not have been a great thought process of how things were going to how the customer was going to experience this thing that you have sold them. And the salesperson is burnt out, they don't want to go back and do it, and the advertiser is not put out. So I start with that because this is what this really is creating a positive customer experience for your advertisers, and that essentially develops longer term business for you. So I'm going to read through these quickly just so you can see what all of these different steps are, and then I'll talk about kind of how you would approach this. But the first is obviously proposal creation. So making it easy to create proposals and making those consistent. The second is order approval. So who is going to approve these orders and who is overseeing the actual business there. Then who makes sure that the order gets entered. I know that seems simple and easy, but a lot of times that is a missed step that happens is we get moving really quickly and start executing, and all of a sudden the revenue reporting is not set up. And then project management of how do you organize all of the information around a radio creative and radio campaign and a digital campaign and maybe a sponsorship and social campaign. There's a lot of different moving pieces there. So how do you manage all of that information? Then inventory placement. So obviously your system that places your radio inventory has been ongoing for a long time and you fine-tune that process, but the digital inventory placement is a whole separate production line. If you can want to think about it from a manufacturing perspective, that it's a whole different production line and who's setting that up. And then in digital specifically, reporting and optimization of those campaigns and then recap and renewals are a huge part of how the digital marketplace works. So that's the whole ecosystem in itself. And like I said, this is a lot of different pieces. And in today's environment where everybody's working remotely and you're trying to figure out how to actually move and evolve in this space, you can still really tackle each one of these steps pretty easily. And the best way that I've seen it done is really talking to the current employees who are doing these jobs in the radio environment or in your event sponsorship and content environments, and asking them how things get done. And then as a management team, if you have perspective from all of your different team members of how this stuff is happening today, you can really craft a really efficient system by not changing everything or starting from scratch, but really seeing, okay, these are all the things that we currently have in place. And if we evolve this and change this person's job to do this and create this communication connection, you can make all of these things happen pretty simply. But again, it's really getting that information from your current team members to be able to see what their perspective and how this works and find those hurdles that you may have.
I totally agree, Angie. I think, there are, if you're new to digital or thinking that you need to get into it, you might look at something and say 7 steps. Oh my gosh, that seems like a lot. Are we ready to do that? But, I think to liken it to things we're already doing, remotes or NTR or sponsorships, and really just the cross-departmental relationships that are already there that for other sales events or revenue lines, we may just be able to, within your organization, be able to pick and choose some of the systems that are already in place, or help you refine maybe some other things that are going on there. It's really your ultimate goal. You're trying to create a positive customer experience for each digital advertiser, and the better you make it for them, the more obviously success sellers are seeing, and then you're moving on to step 7 there, recap and renewal. The next one is, Angie, as you and I were talking through the materials and the content for this webinar, this next one really jumped out, and you brought some great examples along. And it's an approach, I think, that you're going to speak to here for proposals is maybe a little opposite to what most stations think is valuable or most valuable to advertisers when they're building proposals.
Yeah, absolutely. So designing proposal templates. I am a huge proponent of setting brand standards and creating proposal templates. And the reason of that is because after managing, we had over 125 salespeople, which is a decent amount of salespeople to try to manage, but trying to get proposals out the door for 125 salespeople, if you're creating them custom all the time, you cannot scale and you lose opportunities because it takes too long to get proposals out the door. So I think that's the key reason, is that you can scale your business faster if you can create proposal templates. But there's also some other key elements to this. Number one, in today's environment, every business and every brand has to brand themselves visually, because social media and the internet is such a huge part of everybody's business today. And you want to make sure that that gets delivered consistently with all of your employees across your organization. You want to speed up the time that it takes to create a proposal. So if you have an opportunity, how do we get that proposal created and some solution created quickly and back out to the customer so that they can say yes? And then the last piece is really setting yourself up in a positive way of showing your radio offering plus your digital offering. It takes some finesse and it takes some work on really delivering that message well. And so you want to make sure that you have that put together in a really thoughtful way, that all of your salespeople are able to do that effectively and not having to make it up by themselves. On this slide, you can see on the right-hand side, I won't go through all of that, but there's elements of a proposal template. There's a lot of different consulting companies and a lot of different, you can even Google what a great proposal looks like. This is really just kind of a high level of what should your proposals look like and what they go through. And one of the other important elements to this, I think, as a reason why you would do this is, in my experience of working with lots of advertisers and lots of salespeople in the broadcast industry had a tendency to create their proposals to make it look like their customer as opposed to look like you as a brand. And you really run the risk there that you are using a customer's brand image incorrectly. And more often than not, that distracts your advertiser from what you're proposing and the benefits you're proposing. And all they're worried about is, did you use their logo right? Or why did you use that picture? It hasn't been we haven't used that picture in our marketing for 10 years or something like that. So it does have a big distraction it's a big risk to take when you go and use your customers' brands and you don't know their brand standards very well. And it takes away from showcasing the benefits that you're offering as a partner and what they can get from partnering with you.
Yeah, so absolutely. Flashing back to a meeting with an advertiser where, the marketing director spent more time trying to figure out where the image or the logo we used, the version of it, came from versus what we were presenting to her. And it was with best intention. We're going to see this grocery store in their chain, and they've got this big brand. Let's make sure we make this about them. But really, the more you and I spoke about this, having brand standards, having a look that is 100% yours, and templates and proposals that are 100% yours. You also have to fast forward to you've been in to pitch. The 3 other stations have been in town to pitch. When she's or he's fumbling through PowerPoints on their desk, you want yours to stand out and be memorable for what it is and what it includes. I think you gave us some examples here.
Yep, we did.
Through these?
Yeah, let's do it. So this is an example of the brand standards that were created for Hank FM in Indianapolis, and this is a PowerPoint that goes out to all of the on-air talent, to the sales teams, to the sales support staff, and everybody in the building that understand how do you use the look and feel of the brand. And it's pretty basic and easy to think about, but it's also really nice to have it in one place so that everybody does understand what are there. So the first piece is just, here's the brand standards, and I think it's really smart that they put in there who the listener is. So who are we? It's a description of what their core audience is from a radio perspective. And then at the bottom, you see the logo usage. And what I love about this is that on the left-hand side, you can see the different versions of the logos and what they look like. And on the right-hand side, it shows you the don'ts. So it's kind of the do's and don'ts, which is really important, especially with if our brands or your brands are looking at all of this, think about what your customers' brands and what they don't want you to do with logos. So that kind of reinforces that message. The lingo is just word clouds of things, words that you should be using and words that you shouldn't, which I think could be a really great ongoing document for your branding and what the positioning is. And then the last piece is kind of the nuts and bolts of branding and design. It's your fonts and the colors and how you would find that and how you use them. So really clear direction on how to deliver that consistent brand standard.
That's great. Do you feel like this was a big lift for the station to do this, or was it did everybody kind of get on board and execute this pretty quickly?
I think it should be pretty easy to get. I think the actual document is pretty easy to pull together, because if you have a designer working for you as an employee, or you have a designer as a project or a freelance consultant, all designers work off of this kind of format. So it's pretty easy to put these together. I think the harder part is making sure that it's communicated and really the kind of being the holding people accountable to using this. So it feels kind of bad at first when you start to use these and you start calling people out and saying, hey, you're using the wrong font. People can kind of get upset about that, and you just have to manage through that from a leadership perspective and be like, look, we're going to call each other out because we want all of this to be consistent. Let's make sure we're using the right fonts and the right colors and all of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I think it's the implementation and communication to your team is probably a little harder than creating this. But like I said, if you have a designer in-house, they could knock this out really quickly, or you could hire someone for a handful of hours to put this together for you on a freelance basis.
Got it. I think in our current time, the missing element here, or the next stage element, is a Zoom or a go-to background. So I'm sure we'll see that next time.
Exactly.
So you also talked about, and you've shared some examples of proposals. And what I think is so important here is if you are a new to digital station, or or you're trying to renew your efforts, or you've added products to your mix, or a new something new on the front end, the back end, analytics, your sellers they're going to hear about it through training. They're going to hear it from management. They're going to see and understand the importance because it's new and it's being launched to them. But what I think a great proposal does is it also creates a talking point, guide or script, really, for them to present the first 2 or 3 times out. You can do sample sessions, you can do some practice runs, but once they have this in hand or on screen, I think a great proposal can do that. Do you want to walk us through what you like about this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from a design perspective, notice it's really simple. It has the fan logo at the bottom and a clear bar, and then it really highlights the content that's being created. So that this really, from a design perspective, this just reinforces a simple template from a proposal perspective that you can control. And then this is a digital content sponsorship opportunity that the reason that I think this is important to showcase is exactly what you're saying, is asking your teams to create all of this data and pull together this story every time they go to put a proposal together is really difficult. But as a management team, as a product team, if you can put together the nuts and bolts of what is made up of these big opportunities, your sales team people can actually start to get really good at presenting them. And then the bottom two, the slides on the right show more of a specific data of the actual product and then how it's used in a proposal. So it's much easier once you have these templates put in place with analytics and stories and how things work, and then your salespeople can create their creative solutions around that much quicker.
Agreed. Looks good. So if you rewind back to the life cycle here that we talked about, we've gone through proposal templates. Now the next one is maybe the most maybe a little more unique, or maybe the one that most people haven't thought of, and that's setting up a project management system. And as stations look at this, they're used to systems for traffic, obviously for logs, probably ADP or something on the on personnel and employment side. But now looking at the need for some sort of project management system for digital and for these digital campaigns. Walk us through your experience there and how this bubbled up as a key point that you feel is important for everybody to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. So broadcast advertising solutions now with audio, content, streaming, podcasting, sponsorships, virtual events, especially now with new kinds of events and all the evolution that's happening there, you have a ton of details that you need to manage across multiple departments in your organization. And to execute flawlessly, everybody needs to be on the same page at all the time. And when you're trying to use an Excel sheet that is being shared across the board, or you're trying to use email to keep everybody updated, things get dropped really easily, especially in email. And this was a huge problem early on when I was evolving our teams to digital, and we moved to this probably 7 years ago. So this was probably a change management project that I did 7 years ago, of just creating a single place that all of the information around a campaign can live. So when your social media copy or your on-air copy sponsorship person is needing to find out what are the copy lines and what are the tags, or what is the deadlines and what are the calendar updates of what needs to happen, instead of trying to communicate all of those details to 4 or 5 different people in your organization through email or through conversations, these project management systems put all of that into an organized fashion. They create to-do lists, they create priorities for you, they create calendars so you can look and see what's actually happening across all your campaigns. And really, it was the only way that we could come close to flawlessly executing campaigns, is to have all of this information in one place. And this slide and this table showcases 5 of probably 100 different project management systems that are out there and available. This goes from really inexpensive monthly things to other companies that you're probably familiar with on what that looks like. But if you haven't looked into how the project management system works or what that looks like, it's time to do it, especially if you're adding digital to your organization, because trying to manage the details without it is really difficult.
Yeah, I think a system like this, is sometimes, again, if you're going across departments for assistance here, this is maybe the neutral product. It isn't just what IT uses, or it isn't just what sales uses, but if there's already one in place, certainly consider that. And a lot of folks if you're using Office, your Office license may already include something like this. But I think the key point here is what gets measured gets done. And if you're adding new responsibilities to people, or new workflow, new expectations, I think this project management system, having something in place is certainly going to be valuable there, just to ensure you're checking the right boxes and hitting deadlines, or understanding hey, this part of the process takes a little longer. Let's be sure to set customer expectations accordingly. Whether that's campaign launch time or creative turnaround time, there's always something you learn here. And I think it was your line. You also said, with virtual environments, I think using something like this is fairly COVID-proof, and keeps everybody on the same page. And you can use it online through an app, and hopefully eliminate chances for a misstep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely, again, it's similar to what we talked about with the implementing brand standards. There's change management that needs to be done with your team. Everyone needs to use it, and there's some accountability about using it. But once people see the benefit that, hey, the proposal is in one place, all of the deadlines and details are in from when their creative is due and their audio creative is due, and when special premium homepage takeovers or big blog posts or things are being published, all of that can live in a really nice organized calendar that everybody can see, instead of trying to filter through their emails to try to chase down what date and what time something should happen, which is awful for anybody to try to do.
Agreed. Well, let's move to something here we talk a lot about at Marketron, and you're equally familiar with. So you've prospected, you've made proposals, maybe refined proposal, close the sale, get everything built for the campaign, launch the campaign, deliver to the sites you promised, deliver the tactics you said you would. Now what? Where what's the best way to go back and prove it to that advertiser or that agency, and make sure they're aware of everything, not necessarily all of the work that went into it, but more importantly, that you delivered what you promised.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is something that a lot of times get pushed to the back burner because sales teams are always focused on the next revenue win and the new opportunities that they have in place. And we all know reporting and recaps turn into renewals. That's how you get your renewals in setting all of this up. So it certainly is an important element of this. And again, sometimes it gets pushed to the back burner because everyone's trying to work hard to get their next win and the next revenue growth opportunity. But really taking the time to make this easy, very similar to how you did you work with your proposals, can make this a much more effective process. So setting up what does a recap coming out of your organization look like, and what are the key elements, and setting that up so that it helps to tell the story, and then giving it to your support staff so they can fill in the blanks is really the best way to handle this. Asking support staff to try to create the strategy around a recap is really difficult, and salespeople are a lot of times, they don't have time to really pull all of the different numbers together, especially if it's doing a cross-platform campaign like radio plus digital plus social or virtual event. So I think it's again just important to standardize this so that you have a set template and you can drop in numbers and pull all the information together and get it out so that you can get renewals put in place.
Agreed. I think, again, standardizing and having something that's somewhat templated, 80%, let's say, just make sure everybody's looking at the right numbers. And that's, becomes another training point where, they have to know where to go look for, a CTR for that campaign, or, for calls if you were tracking calls and email delivery dates. So I think really important. And really when you're walking in, we used to tell our sellers, when you're walking in with a recap and showing them what was delivered, it's also a chance to talk about how do you grow and how do you maybe start to position for incremental revenue. Make sure that they were tracking the same things along the way, and just gives you another consultative conversation. And it's less about a banner and more about here's what it did for you, here's what we saw that it did for you, let's talk about that, and let's talk about what we might do in our next campaign.
Absolutely.
We're going to pull up now double tap there, an example recap as that you're sharing with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a radio plus a digital event recap, and for event sponsorship. So it had radio components, had an event component, and then it also had a lot of digital. So these are small little boxes, but you can see most of the visuals on this are all of the screenshots and examples of what happened in digital. So you can go through and see what this looks like. And really the way that this is laid out is they start with the key marketing challenges, so that review what the key marketing challenges, show all of the different digital inventory that was placed and what happened. And then they had the audio. So adding audio to your recaps is a really important piece. Obviously, it's what radio broadcast leads with. So making sure that you do add the audio in there is a really powerful element. And then just a really simple end recap of what are all of the results that came out of that. And obviously, even with Marketron, obviously does this really well. They pull all of the digital pieces together, and you can even have a more robust and much more analytic look at it. But at least you've got, here's all the different places that things need to be dropped into, and a support staff member could do this really easily once they know what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think, the ability to show cross-media, everything that you're delivering to that advertiser, to that buyer, one person, multiple stations, multiple digital tactics, single reporting, and single invoice, frankly, makes it all much easier for them. So thanks for sharing these examples. Thanks to the groups that provided them to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. The indie market in MS.
Very good. Well, Christine, I think takes us up to Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, JB and Angie. That was a wonderful presentation. And we've got a couple minutes left, so I'm actually going to start throwing some questions you guys' way. So
Excellent.
the first question I've got for you is, the campaign execution seems very complex. Where do you typically see breakdown in the cycle occur?
I'll start there. You know, it's hopefully we've showed that there are a number of steps. So obviously more than one or two can make it feel complex. But you know, there's things that you're probably already doing or have been doing for your traditional media business. So you know, I would liken it to that first in terms of, okay, we've done this before. Let's see how we would apply our past experience and past expertise to that. When it comes to digital, you know, I think the breakdown can occur at a couple of different levels, and you know, it's primarily geared around who's doing what. So, you know, if your seller is tasked with keying in the order, are they also tasked with securing the creative or submitting a request to build creative, and keeping track of those things? Because it may not mirror what they do for radio, you know, or if it does, it's doing it in a different way that's uncomfortable. So I think it's more the project ownership and who's owning each of the steps along the way. And you know, if you have a support staff in place that can take the proposal and they're converting it to insertion order, and they're you know, keeping it on the rails post sale, that's great. If not, I think it's just setting expectations for the seller.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two places that I saw breakdowns happen the most, and that is in proposal creation. So if a salesperson doesn't have all of the data around what the digital inventory is and how it works, there can be a big breakdown in the pricing of that can be off. So your margins on digital inventory can be decreased and diminished pretty quickly if you don't have a really clear process around how a proposal gets created and gets approved before it goes out the door. And then I agree with JB. The biggest breakdown is the amount of communication that has to happen from the salesperson, from the advertiser, to the teams creating the creative and implementing the creative and targeting. All of that, there's just a lot of detail that if that's not organized in a thoughtful way, those details get lost really easily.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that makes complete sense, and good points to keep an eye on for everyone when they're going through this system. So I'm going to throw another question at you. So let's say our operation is lean. Would you recommend using a project management system even if there's only a few players involved?
I would, you know, and I totally understand the perspective there too. You know, not every group would have maybe some of the roles that we discussed here, but you know, I think the use of one, it just creates a level playing field for expectations, for who's doing what, and you know, and it exposes the progress and where we are. You know, within Marketron, you know, just here as a you know, partner side, you know, obviously we've got a number of different ways we're interacting with clients. Those are all managed and measured different ways. And then my previous life as on the station side, you know, sort of the same thing where we had, you know, something that everybody could go in and take a look at to understand, you know, what was happening with campaign status, or why was this creative still not launched, or, you know, on the positive side, just, you know, progress, you know, number of orders we've closed this month over last month. And so it's any tool that provides visibility into activity, revenue, operations, you know, I think it will be beneficial to minimally review it, and then hopefully you can find a way to execute it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this presentation, I probably delivered that message already, but I think having a single place where all of the information is, so you know what's missing and what needs to be done next, if you have 2 people or if you have 17 people, it really all needs to be in one place. And so I think especially in today's environment where people are all remote and the only collective work environment they have is a single system that they can get all of their information from, that makes it even more important in today's working environment. And it doesn't have to be really complex. It just needs to be one place that's updated regularly, that all of your team members can see what's happening. So your salesperson knows if something's in process or something's missing, and the team that's responsible for execution knows that as well. If it's living in somebody's email, it's likely going to be missed by somebody else. So that's, again, it's getting out of email and getting it into an organized system that can move you along and scale your business fast.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, you really did hit on that point well, that it's the email that can get you. It doesn't matter how many people, a few or many, but it's having that centralized location where anyone can go at any time. So yes, thank you both. So we talked a lot about at the end about the recap process. Would you, and how that really leads to renewals or the potential for renewals, would you recommend including plans for renewals or extensions in recaps to clients?
I think the seller or whomever is going to visit with the advertiser, and of course I'm rewinding back to the good old days where this was in person most likely. I think you always want to walk in with a sense of asking for the next order, or like I said, talking about incremental. A risk of that though is you may aim too low. You may go in just bumping it up 10%, 20%, or just asking for more of the same. So I think you want to leave some wiggle room for another a review of the buy and the sale that you made, and then maybe an updated needs analysis, and then potentially uncover an opportunity to add tactics, or digital. So I think have something in mind. But right now, particularly while it's virtual and it's over the phone, it's a little tougher to read body language and and really knowing when to go for it, when to ask for it, or maybe just continue asking questions. Angie, what do you think there? I'm a little wishy-washy, I think.
I'm not wishy-washy. I think you absolutely have to ask for the next piece, especially since we're talking about adding digital to your components. I think in radio, it's a lot harder sometimes to have the attribution set up. And certainly there's some really cool attribution tools that are being used out there, but not all of your customers are using them, or the campaigns may be too small to really see what those things look like. But digital gives you a lot of insights on what you could improve. And even if it's a no, I don't want to do that, but I would want to do this response to what you're proposing, the digital reporting and insights are going to give you opportunity to show how you can improve and how you can help your customer generate more revenue and get more customers or build more awareness, whatever they're trying to do. I think you absolutely have to, at this point, assume that they want to continue to grow their business and put a plan in front of them. Sometimes just putting a plan in front of somebody gives them a reaction and response, can start that conversation of, if they say no, they're going to tell you why no, and it may be something else, which is a great place to be in. Instead of trying to get another appointment to pitch something else to the next time. I think we have such a small amount of time with customers at this point. We have to get it all in one shot.
Exactly. No, I do agree. I think, and it reinforces, really maybe a training point internally where, your seller is armed with the analytics. They can see from their desk, it worked. We did what we said we were going to do in terms of driving traffic, driving clicks, emails, whatever it may be. So, I do think it's absolutely valuable to walk in feeling confident based on what that data in front of you, or what the data in front of the seller is telling them.
I also think, just from a kind of a sidebar from what you just said too, is to also be confident in what didn't work. So if one tactic worked much better than another tactic, and really making the shift and saying, hey, we're going to move our investment from this tactic to this tactic because this seems to be driving the most results, that's okay too. And I think sometimes our sales teams get afraid of saying what didn't work, but that's a really important part of really figuring out how to fine tune and move to the next level.
Yep, great point.
Great, thank you both so much. All right, we have just a couple more minutes left, so I'm going to try to get a few more questions into you. Here's one is, so you mentioned having case studies and proposal templates. What's a good method of requesting like an advertiser to allow us to showcase them in a case study? And the concern here is there's a lot of competitors in the local market and they may not like to share their success stories with each other. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've heard that before, both in past experience at a media company and here. I mean, I think we all have our kind of our go-to relationships, on the customer side. I think there's just setting expectations for how the data will be shared. Is this a direct testimonial, or is this are we referencing the category and the success? There are some customers that are fine with either or both. So I think it's positioning where how this will be used, why it's valuable, and and obviously when you're building a proposal for a customer or for a prospect, let's call it, it's custom to that prospect based on the data points that they provided to you, and budget, targeting, parameters, what the creative may be, tactics. You could go see another prospect in the same category, but build a completely different proposal based on where they are in their business cycle. So, I think for me, it was just a matter of sharing with the advertiser how it would be used, and how specific could we be, and obviously wanting to be more specific would be better if I was going to speak to a group of educators, but I could talk about a bank, that non-competitive. We could establish some rules like that, and we've had success with that tactic in the past.
Yeah, I think the best way to do it is similar to testimonials, is create the case study and ask for approval to use it. And I think remembering that the case study is really about showing how your product benefited someone, as opposed to what that specific advertiser's execution of that product. So if you're not going to want to share the exact targeting, you're not going to want to share those kind of their approach of how they use the product, but to be able to see that there was a lift or there was results from the product perspective is probably the best way to write it, so that it doesn't run into competitor issues. And then again, just write it the way to get them to do it. Instead of saying, hey, can I use these numbers as a case study? Write it out and ask them to review it and get back to you. That's a much easier way to get them to agree, is if they see what they're being showcased and how it's being showcased from the initial ask.
Yeah, definitely speeds up the process too.
That's a really good point. Yeah, show them what you're asking for, and you likely get a higher yes rate. So perfect. Thank you both. So one last question, and maybe you have one or two bullet points on this that you guys want to share some information on or thoughts on. But what would you say is a good way to prospect and find new customers for a target list?
Kind of be always seeking new business. I think for individual sellers, maybe who are struggling a little bit more, struggling with digital, or haven't gotten out of the gates. I'll speak to that point. If you're new into this environment, or asking for digital budgets and certainly then digital orders, I would create something maybe by product. So if we're trying to sell email, look at some direct mail pieces, and and have somebody who can prospect that, and find some new folks to call on, or get a sense of what how much they're doing. I think there's all kinds of ways to create target lists. You go through inactives. You can look at average spend and over when they were active with you. If you have any market data, you can use certainly some category specific. What does the typical automotive repair shop spend on digital? Those surveys are out there. So, but I think to break it down, I would go by, maybe by tactic that we want to sell on the digital side and marry it up to a traditional media.
Yeah, I think, so there's prospecting is, everybody has their own unique way of prospecting. I think in a digital place, specifically in a local market, get active on the big digital competitors in your market. So your local newspapers, if there's magazines like city magazines, and anybody that's collecting an email database or a city to-do list. Like I live in Chicago, so there's 312 and there's Block Club. There's a bunch of different digital platforms and digital content that are localized. Get active, sign up for those newsletters, get on their websites and see who they're working with from an ad perspective, as well as kind of content sponsorship perspective. So that's one good way to start prospecting. And then social media as well. If you're not active on social media, start getting active and follow some of those local subsidiaries as well, because Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat will all start targeting you if you are following those kinds of communities. So people that are buying on those social platforms, you can see from there. And then there are companies that, from a management perspective, that do give you reporting and spending in your local markets. So the Media Monitors and X-Ray, they have digital products now that they can show you some of the digital spending. And one of the companies that we worked with heavily was Media Radar. And they show TV, print, radio, and digital ad spend across other places. And they actually pull from specific competitors. So that was a really good prospecting tool as well.
Amazing, great. Thank you both. And with that, this is all the time we have today. So just a reminder that if your question wasn't answered, don't worry, we are going to have someone reach out to you soon and we'll respond to your question. So I want to thank JB and Angie for their time and their insight today. Thank you both so very much.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Awesome. So I just want to let everyone know that we are going to be sending an email out soon. We'll have a link to watch the full recording of the webinar that we just did today, as well as a download of the presentation and a link to register for our next webinar, which is going to be on September 16th, and it will be creating your digital organizational structure. And with that, I thank you.